This is the biggest change we've seen for first homeowners in years. It's gonna save them thousands of dollars on stamp duty. So today, we're gonna break down everything you need to know. So keep watching. Jaden, let's start off with from the top. Really, what has happened? What's the change? And how a first homeowner is gonna be able to save thousands of dollars on stamp duty?
The New South Wales government has finally, after talking about it for what feels like years, announced changes that they're going to make to stamp duty. They're going to turn it into an annual tax instead of being an upfront fee. And in some cases, you could save $20,000, $30,000 in upfront costs that come from your deposit to get into the home market easier. So we're going to go through in this video, I guess, what that's going to look like, what the proposed changes, when it's going to come into act, and even if you end up, if you should wait to buy a home, if you buy one later in the year, what impacts that might have with the stamp duty that could be payable and potentially could be refunded. So let's dive in and look at the details. So the New South Wales government just has announced it's going to make it easier for residents to break into the property market. They've announced the first home buyer choice plan. So it's going to cost them about $700 million to potentially opt out of stamp duty and make it into an annual property tax. So it's like pretty much one of the largest hurdles and one of the biggest barriers to entering a home. And like I said, we're going to go through an example on what that looks like. So under the initiative, first home buyers who opt in will pay an annual property tax of $400 plus 0.3% of the land value of the property. And I'm going to show you how to find the land value in a tick as well. The option is going to be available for properties up to $1.5 million. So, they're kind of limited. If you're buying a multi-million-dollar property, I guess they're assuming that you probably don't need the help with this. Legislation's going to be put into, introduced in the second half of 2022 this year, and eligible first home buyers who apply will be available, will have this pretty much from January 16th, 2023. So interestingly, they do say that first home buyers who exchange contracts between the enactment date of legislation, so if it gets passed, I don't know, say in September or later in the year, and between the 15th of January for the opt-in, can potentially get a refund on stamp duty paid. So if you settle in December, you want to opt in January, you might actually get that money given back under the scheme. And the property is obviously not locked into that scheme if it's sold. So there's some pretty big things. Interestingly as well, they've said that they're still going to do the first home buyer stamp duty exemption if you're buying a place up to $650. So pretty much if you're buying a home under $650, it's probably not going to make a lot of sense to go through the scheme, and there's concessions that are available. So say for example, we've got a stamp duty calculator on our website. Like I said, if you're buying a place for say $600,000 in Sydney as a first home buyer, you're getting stamp duty waived anyway under the current scheme. So instead of paying $22,000, you're only paying $295. So it's obviously not going to make a whole lot of sense to opt into the scheme if you're doing that. But with those discounts, I'll go through an example now, potentially on this property that sold recently in Penrith. So it sold for $750,000. It's obviously a townhouse, so it's not on a huge block of land, but which will affect the kind of calculations. But on a $750,000 purchase, as at today, before the first home buyer choice is introduced by the New South Wales government, you would ordinarily pay $21,165 in stamp duty, and that comes out of your deposit. So even though you've bought a place for $750,000, you might have paid your 10% deposit, so you pay $75,000. Plus, you got to pay $21,000, so you're kind of putting in what's that, like $6,000 in sort of deposit and stuff that you've got to put together. Interestingly, under this scheme, if I find my land tax calculator, so just on the New South Wales Value General website, you can actually search for any property in New South Wales and find out what the gross land value is. So in this case, the gross land value is $177. Calculated on the scheme, 0.3%, it works out to be around sort of, plus the $400, works out to be about $900 a year that you'd be paying in the stamp duty under the new scheme. So if you own the property for 10 years, you're paying $9,000. 20 years, you're paying $18,000. So really, if you're going to own the property for 20 years or more, the old scheme is going to probably make a lot more sense. If you're going to only own it for 4, 5, 6 years, this new scheme's amazing. Like, you're only paying $900 a year. You're going to save that $22,000 that you're otherwise going to have to pay in stamp duty, or $21,000. And like I said, instead of having to come up with that sort of $96,000 as your deposit, you're potentially only going to come up with your 10%, so $75,000 plus a little bit for the land tax and that sort of stuff.
So I think this scheme makes a lot of sense if you're a first homeowner and you're struggling to get that deposit together and the stamp duty is one of those barriers that you're finding is a bit of a difficulty. The New South Wales government actually said that it's going to cut up to 2 years of savings for first homeowners to get in the market a little bit sooner. As Jaden said, depending on the land value is another thing to keep in mind, because the higher the land value, the higher this ongoing cost is. I've got an example on my screen here that I wanted to show you. Say, same example, let's say you bought the property for $750,000, but in this scenario, let's say the land's where all the value's at. So if it's a $600,000 land at 0.3%, you're paying $1,800 a year plus the $400, so it's $2,200 a year. So once again, if you're hanging on this, for say 10 years, well then your stamp duty is going to potentially be met by that fee. The other thing is based on the land value. So that if the land value keeps going up, each year you're going to be paying progressively more and more. So I think it's one of those things for first homeowners out there to have both a short-term view and a long-term view, because if you are thinking, oh, we're going to hang on to the property for next 3, 4, 5 years, then some of these calculations make sense. If it's going to be a property that you hold for a long time, well then over time that compounding effect might actually go against you.
Yeah, so a good way to check this is if you check out the Valuer General website. Like I said earlier, it's just if you Google it'll come up. You can do a search for the property, so that's how I found this one before. It'll redirect you to the property number, so it's actually how they kind of find this. And it'll redirect you to another one of these, and then you'll eventually get to the report to see. So, in the case of this example I did before, it's only 135 square meters, so the land value is not as high as, like Nathan said, an example where you might have 500-600 square meters, or bigger, where it's going to end up costing you a lot more over time.
Now, Jaden, I have one question. I know a lot of first homeowners out there are probably thinking this is for New South Wales, but what happens if I'm living in Queensland, WA, other states? I know South Australia's stamp duty is ridiculous. So is there any sort of progression with any other states?
Yeah, it was interesting because New South Wales government came out earlier in this year and they actually said they were going to wait for federal government support to sort of help this scheme get off the ground, and they'd sort of put it on ice. And then now with their budget, I guess with elections happening later in the year, they're just trying to sort of woo voters, I suppose, and they've used it as one of their sort of centerpieces to policy moving forward. At the moment, the Queensland government did their budget actually earlier this week. There was no changes to the first homeowners grant. There's no changes to stamp duty reforms, nothing for property, a bit of stuff on affordable housing, but definitely in Queensland, nothing's changing. With the other states, I haven't really spoken about this. This has been the New South Wales government's kind of centerpiece that they've been talking about. Literally, we did, like I said, a video last year on this. They've been speaking about it for quite some time now. It's been something they've been wanting to tackle and address. So at this stage, it doesn't look likely that some of the other governments are going to kind of jump on it. But I guess, subscribe to our channel. We will have news on it as things come out.
Now, the other thing here is with this scheme, it looks like it's going to be something you'll opt through your solicitor, who usually takes care of the settlement. So it would be pretty straightforward by the sounds of it, whereby you'd let them know on the settlement or prior to settlement your option, whether you're going to pay upfront or annually. So something to watch out for. Even with the banks, they'll probably need some sort of a paperwork, I'd imagine. So when they're working out your assessments and deposits required, they can take into account if your stamp duty is payable or not. So I guess let's watch this space. It's going to be live from the 16th of January. Once the legislation passes, remembering you can actually have that refunded if you change your mind after the 16th of January, if you do buy before then. So exciting times for first homeowners. As always, here at Hunter Galloway, we help home buyers right across Australia. We're based in Brisbane, but deal with people Australia-wide. So if you're looking to refinance, looking to buy your first home, or even investment, hit us up at huntergalloway.com.au or call us on 1300 088 065, and we'll see you next time.